right, well, it looks like we've got a great group and we're 2 minutes in. So let's start with youth mentoring trends and strategies in a time of social distancing.
Oh, thank you so much. And we are so excited to be here. And joining me, I'm Desiree Robertson from Mentor, is Natalie Foster from Mentor Virginia, and Aries Hill from the Governor's Prevention Partnership in Connecticut. We just want to have a lot of good conversation today with our panelists and have time at the end for questions. So welcome to Youth Mentoring Trends and Strategies in a Time of Social Distancing. Next slide, please. So again, we'll talk a little bit about ourselves, the overview of youth mentoring trends and strategies from a larger national perspective, along with some successes and challenges and pandemic pivots in the field. So just want to give my colleagues, Natalie and Aries, a quick second to introduce themselves. Well, Aries, do you want to say a quick?
I can go ahead. Yes, I was going to let Natalie go, but thank you, Desiree, for that introduction. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Aries Hill. I'm the mentoring program manager at the Governor's Prevention Partnership in Connecticut. We're the state affiliate to our national mentoring partnership. And I'm all things training and technical assistance. And I also convene the mentoring collaboratives around the state. So in Connecticut, we have 5 mentoring collaboratives in different parts of the state that come together and do things as events, recruitment, and monthly meetings. And so I convene those around the state. And that's my story.
Hi, and I'm Natalie Foster with Mentor Virginia. And like I said, I will be talking about some of the successes and challenges within the mentoring field. And let me go ahead and get the presentation back up so that we can start it.
Great.
Awesome.
All right, so thank you. We here at Mentor, we are known as the National Mentoring Partnership. So 30 years ago, Mentor was created to expand opportunity for young people by building a youth mentoring field and movement, serving as the expert and go-to resource on quality mentoring. The result is more than 10-fold increase of young people in structured mentoring relationships from hundreds of thousands to millions. This map that you see on your screen shows where we already have affiliates. We are building and we are still building.
Jenny.
Yeah.
And I must remind everyone to please mute yourself. We appreciate it. But this map shows where we already have affiliates and we are still building. Our plan is to have a presence in 26 states by the end of 2020. The national and local office and being the unifying champion of this movement. And of course, you'll hear from 2 of our affiliates in our network today. Next slide, please. So a little bit about Mentor and the work that we have done on COVID-19 and social distancing. We conducted 2 surveys, nationwide surveys this year to find out what was going on in the field from mentoring programs and funders. The surveys gauge the major challenges that programs are facing. And when you talk about challenges, the resources that will be most helpful for them, and just to get a general sense about, mentoring in this time. You will have results. They'll be sent out to you, so you'll be able to see the actual results at the end of the presentation. Next slide. So some of our spring 2020 results. In the spring of 2020, we surveyed a variety of stakeholders, and this is what we found. So some of the most interesting things were 76% of the respondents had already transitioned to using virtual or remote mentoring approaches, which is very different from what we think about the in-person mentoring that happens and occurs. And e-mentoring has not been a utilized model of mentoring in the past. A lot of them used a lot of different platforms, from Google to FaceTime to text messaging to a lot of other things, even including Facebook Messenger. The contact method was actually left up to those for each match to decide. And just thinking about a lot of people did not want to use social media connections due to lack of security, but had to figure out ways to stay connected. Mentor, tips have also been very useful. So these are some of our survey results from the spring. Next slide, please. Through those surveys, we found out that program staff are experiencing a myriad of things around COVID-19 and the pandemic. There were concerns about their own jobs. So thinking about, layoffs, if you weren't there in person with the youth and et cetera. A lot of our mentoring programs are embedded in youth development programs. So there was a huge concern for that. The other ones is concerned about the organization's financial stability. If they were not having kids in the centers, were not working with the kids in schools, et cetera, were they going to be able to actually meet their goals and keep up with financial stability? Then lack of childcare and school options for the program staff. So having to deal with the fact that they were actually, with their own kids, and could they actually go to work and do the work like that? So a lot of different things around the program staff came up in our surveys. Next slide. So thinking about the young people who we're here for, and so being able to think a little bit about disconnection from school, they thought about the caring adults that they find there, they did not have access to them, and then adjusting to distance learning. So that was huge. Thinking about some positive things were more togetherness with family or immediate households. So thinking about shifts in the family dynamics were big issues. Also, how did the young people were dealing with their parents' stress? And so again, these were some of the things that came out of this particular 2 surveys. And the next piece. So thinking about the mentors, what other stressors might mentors be facing that could impact the work that they're doing with the mentoring programs outside of the ones you see here on the slide. So again, thinking about stress, burnout, being stretched too thin, they're having to deal with family issues themselves, job issues, job loss, financial uncertainty, and then how could they actually become and be a resource to the youth if they're dealing with, some of these own issues that are coming out of the pandemic. Next slide, please. So you think about before COVID, research is still currently is still evolving and being conducted about e-mentoring. E-mentoring can also be known as virtual mentoring. So thinking about E standing for electronic. So we want to be able to look at some of the research and some of the things that have been done in the past on e-mentoring. So next slide, please. So some initial thoughts that came out of our research. We do have a full research department here at Mentor. But e-mentoring is technology dependent. Usually it's not the proprietary platform dependent, but it's very key to have some strong technology if you're gonna think about e-mentoring. It's not regular mentoring done remotely. So again, thinking about that it actually has to have some kind of solid base. And then most programs are serving older youth and they already may be doing some virtual mentoring. So these are some of the things that came out of our initial research about e-mentoring before COVID. You can go to the next slide. We actually have created a free supplement to our Elements of Effective Practice for Mentoring. If you have not seen a copy of that, the elements are also free on our website at mentoring.org. But we looked at 72 resources in total. If anyone's out there that is interested in some of the background, we do have background and information in the actual e-mentoring supplement. But we think about that a lot of the ranges were 12 young adults. There were 25 middle or high school, and then 5 elementary schools. So thinking about how the design of the program, if you're thinking about actually moving towards e-mentoring, this actual supplement is a great starting point, along with the Elements of Effective Practice. Next slide, please. So some of the major trends on e-mentoring, what they look like is, again, we lack rigorous outcome evaluation around e-mentoring. So It's real hard to find the clear best practices, but our e-mentoring supplement tries to pull them all together. Modern technology has also allowed for more of the software platforms to, they've been mute. There are also many processes through which e-mentoring can facilitate positive gains. And you'll see a couple of them on your slide, and I'll give you a few seconds to look at those. But one of the most ones that we wanted to point out is your increasing social capital, and building of networks is increased if you can actually pull together an e-mentoring platform with your regular mentoring. Next slide, please. So again, thinking about it, we here at Mentor, we wanted to find out what was the best things that we could offer for the field. And we partnered up with two great organizations and businesses to create what we call our virtual mentoring portals, or our VMP, which are free. And I'll talk a little bit about those. So in response to the need of a platform that provides safe and monitored communications, again, we partnered with Cricket together and I Could Be, and to ensure physical distances did not mean social disconnection. So leading experts on the mentoring field launched the virtual mentoring portal. I Could Be, one of the leading experts on virtual mentoring in the US since 2000, and Mentor, the nation's field and movement leader for youth mentoring for the last 30 years, joined forces to develop this free tool for youth 13 and older. So the I Could Be platform is for 13 years and older. The virtual mentoring portal provides unstructured, which is internal, monitored email, monitor programs. They have a virtual mentoring access for existing mentees and their mentors. The platform is constructed with respect to best practices, safety, and data privacy to ensure that youth 12 and under also have access to the virtual mentoring in this movement. Mentor partnered with Cricket Together to actually expand the portal. So Cricket Together provides a convenient, rewarding, and impactful approach to e-mentoring. It connects mentors and students virtually across the US in order to overcome geographic and social economic barriers. Interested organizations will be using an existing platform developed to support children with a structured evidence-based curriculum, and participating program staff will have access to an administrative portal that will enable them to manage the program and review mentee and mentor participation and communication on the VMP. And so the biggest thing about the two platforms is they are free, and you're able to apply for them on our website at mentoring.org. Next slide, please. Another technology platform that Mentor has also partnered up with is called the Mentor app. So it's created by TBA, which is a software company, and Mentor, and allows for in-person mentoring programs and community leaders to easily start their own digital mentoring program. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a few more slides. But again, thinking about at $17.50 per match, in-person mentoring is too expensive for most programs. And so being able to think about a way for you to monitor matches, especially in a social distancing time, this is a great opportunity as well. Next slide, please. So what do we do as we move forward, and what are some resources that are available for you? And so being able to think about, at the start of this academic year, program focus is on virtual mentoring for many of our programs. Safety is also another issue. So not just safety for the kids, but safety for the mentors and for the programs. But you think about the creation of intentional policies and addressing the digital divide in communities across the country. And so a lot of people are asking, how do we facilitate peer and group mentoring virtually? Some of them think about how do they actually address web-based solutions if they can't afford some of the apps where you can actually monitor communication between the actual mentees and the mentors. And then thinking about how do you actually maintain connection. Mentors continue to work and communicate with our affiliates and partners to support the young people in schools and making sure they have necessary supports and resources. Next slide, please. So if we think about it, in the next coming weeks and months, we are actually adding more and more updates to our mentors virtual mentoring resources. We have an actual resource page, which you'll see on the next slide. So we have a Mentor COVID-19 website. So this is our primary location for our site, our suite of resources. And it is on the, again, the link that you see on the slide, but we'll also put it inside of the chat for you. Tips for mentors on how to connect with young people. And our resource for leveraging text-based messaging practices are a few. Mentors advocacy and policy response to this. There's also FAQs that highlight some of our organizational responses. You'll also see some links to our affiliates pages where they've created a ton of resources for not only program staff, but mentors, parents, and the youth. And then again, our findings from our research into the impact of COVID-19, which you'll see on the next slide. So this is actually a research study that was conducted by Dr. Michelle Kaufman at Johns Hopkins University and recently released in partnership with Mentor on mentoring in the time of COVID-19. So again, anyone that's interested in a lot of the research that's being done around this switch or move from static mentoring in person to a kind of a hybrid model or just strictly e-mentoring, you can find out a lot of information on Dr. Kaufman's research page. One of the greatest things that we offer at Mentor is the opportunity for free, no-cost technical assistance for programs, mentoring programs, and youth development programs that focus on youth mentoring. So to access support for your program, including training and monitoring in a virtual world, you can access free technical assistance. And both of the actual affiliates who you see on our call today are technical assistance providers for their states. And so again, we welcome you to actually apply to this, and additional resources in response to COVID will also be on the National Mentoring Resource website, which I'll put in the chat when I finish this presentation. And so I want to be able to turn it over to my colleague, Natalie Foster from Mentor Virginia, to talk a little bit about the successes and challenges that are in the field now.
Thank you, Desiree. So again, I'm with Mentor Virginia, Director of Programs and Partnerships. And when the pandemic hit, we had many programs contacting us to talk about youth strategies in the mentoring field. And so what I'm going to present to you are some of the things that we worked as a consultant with these programs, we trained program partners and their mentors in some of these areas, and then just actually some of my personal experiences as well. So like I said, some of the successes that we learned early on is if mentors can learn effective text-based messaging. So you'll see on the right-hand side, I have a picture of some of the emojis. It really helps to bring a conversation in the virtual space alive, and young people enjoy that you're connecting with them in that space. Another thing that has been successful is delivering goodie bags for mentors and mentees. I just had one with my program. I've got a cup here from my mentoring program. It's got little cookies and candies and pens and would you rather book to kind of help you to start those conversations when you're in the mentoring space. It really makes them kind of connect and feel good about that when both the mentor and the mentee get the same goodie bag. Another thing that we found, and this came out of the research, as Desiree said, there's still not a lot of research quite on this topic, but as it's coming in, what they're finding is that a project-based virtual experience is more successful sometimes than just having too much open space time to talk. So if you're in the STEM field, if there's a science project that both of you can do at the same time, that is helpful as well. Offering incentives for the mentees to get online on time. This actually happened. So like I said, I'm a mentor myself, and they announced which mentee had gotten on board. It's for a middle school program, and she won a $5 Starbucks gift card. Try group virtual mentoring first before introducing one-on-one interaction. So if you had traditionally been a one-on-one mentoring program, we're finding that first start in a group setting. That's the same way that my mentoring program began. It's usually one-on-one, but just to get comfortable for everyone in that virtual space and to be safer. And then after about the first month, moving into some more one-on-one interactions. And one of the final things is joining a peer mentoring working group to share ideas. At Mentor Virginia, we created 4 different mentor working groups from different mentoring program partners. One was school-based, one was community-based, one was for group mentoring, and then we actually do have one that's just STEM-based as well, with some that are doing literacy too. And then on the flip side, here's some of the pain points or challenges that I was hearing were coming from program partners. That they were if they didn't train them on the mentors on the virtual platform or on cyber etiquette, that they were having some challenges. And that also applied for the mentees too. Sometimes we assume that young people just know what they're doing with the virtual platform or how to be in that space, and that's not always the case. So it was really important, even if mentoring programs hadn't always trained their mentees, to do that here in the virtual space. Again, I had mentioned the too much open space time. Even with the project base, you might give 15 minutes to open space time just to say, hey, how are you doing? What's new in your life? And then, if it's an hour-long program, have 45 minutes of project base, something to do, focus on, virtual field trip, whatever is there. The mentors were unengaged, and that primarily was because they had a delay in their program starting. And so they really had a challenge on how to keep their mentors engaged during that delay until they could figure out kind of all the moving parts. And so what they found is that if they could train them on certain training topics, that still kept the mentors engaged while they were getting prepped and ready. Another challenge was vague expectations on family engagement required to participate in virtual mentoring. Depending on the age and no matter what, many of these young people in these mentoring programs are used to sometimes it taking place during the school day, where they didn't, someone came by and just said, I'm ready to mentor you. And now they have to be responsible for getting on it at a certain time, potentially sharing a computer with a family member. And so if mentoring programs didn't have kind of like a 30-minute orientation with family members about what their part was in it, it became challenging. And then finally, just forgetting self-care. We are all in kind of this virtual space, and just you might get some compassion fatigue. So really taking care of yourself, breathing before you get on the call, putting all of your phones away. I know at the last minute you can be distracted with certain things. The next slide I want to go over is my virtual mentoring experience. So like I said, I am paired up with she's in 7th grade, a 7th grade young girl. And so there's a group of us, about 30, I think, and we were all, just like it did here, it took, a few minutes to get all the mentors and mentees on board. So I want to make sure that you realize that's the same thing in real life. So it took us about 10 minutes. Not all the the kids were on their video camera. In fact, my mentee, she was a little shy. She didn't want to. She says, oh, I'm wearing a hairnet today. I don't want to be on in front of everyone else. We had checked in on another young person because we saw a phone number and a name we didn't recognize. And we said, are you supposed to be in this program? We weren't sure if it was a sibling's phone, because you have to remember that too. They could be using family members' phones. So just getting everyone kind of in order. And this was our first meeting together. So they actually introduced the pairs right then and there. And then we did an icebreaker activity. It was a toilet paper activity. So all we were told were to go to our bathroom and get some toilet paper, some sheets of toilet paper. And so I had run in and I got mine, and I had 7 pieces. And then later we were told however many pieces you had taken, that's how many fun facts or interesting facts you had to tell about yourself. So thankfully I didn't get too many of those. But once we did that, then we went into a small group breakout session. And with Zoom, that's something that you could do. And so what we did is it was 2 different match pairs. So there were 2 mentors and 2 mentees in a small group. And that's where we shared our interesting facts about each other. And we were trying to then find out where we had things in common as well. So we would talk about, do you have siblings? Do you, like reading? There were different things that we were trying to find in common. We came back as a large group. So there was kind of like a second breakout session, and all of the groups came back together, and whoever had the most unique items then kind of won that round. So if you had said, oh, we've all got a sister, and another group had said that, you didn't get a point for that. But if no one had said that as something in common, then you got a point. So that was really engaging in that large group experience. And then we kind of said our virtual goodbye and went on our way. And I've just gotten an email that, you know, tomorrow reminding me that from 12:30 to 1:30 we'll be online, and it's a Halloween theme. So we can put a Halloween background, or we can wear a Halloween costume. So there are really some fun ways that you can still be engaged in this virtual space. So at this point, I will pass it up to Aristed.
Thank you, Natalie. Great information. And I want to really kind of write off of your coattail when you talk about the group mentoring, when we talk about bright spots of the pandemic pivot. Early on, I had the pleasure of convening with one of our corporate partners. They had a mentoring program with a bunch of seniors that started with them when they were actually freshmen. And so when the pandemic hit, everybody went home, and I got a phone call, and they were frantic about, listen, you know, what are we going to do? Can we get together, and how should we do things? The school is not allowing us to see people. And so what we did was we talked with the superintendent, and they started to let the students have virtual classrooms. And we started our first virtual mentoring session maybe 2 weeks after the virtual classroom started. Now, I've been with this group for a while, and I was able to see them interact with each other at the school. And you know how students are, especially seniors, they're busy, they're talking with their mentors, but they have other things to do. But I tell you, we were separated for about 3 weeks. And once we got together, and I happened to be in that group mentoring meeting, it was electric. I'm telling you, the relationships that those young people made with our corporate partners, and they made with the young people, was unbelievable. So that was a bright spot for me to see that during this dark time that you know, they were able to make connections. Some of the young people were essential workers. They were working at Walmart and at supermarkets, and we were giving them kudos for doing that, because at that time it was really unstable as far as what the pandemic could do. And so thank you for sharing that. And that was one of the bright spots and some things I'm going to talk about. If you can go to the next slide. So one of the things that we found that was a bright spot in the pandemic pivot, I have to give credit to an executive director for a school-based mentoring program in Bridgeport, Connecticut. She came up with that because she moved very quickly to make sure that she could cover her mentor-mentee matches as the seniors are getting ready to graduate. And so she was able to do that in quick order. And so that's where the term comes from. And we had a meeting the other day, and we laughed about it. And I said, I'm telling everybody about your term. She says, go right ahead, because we had to pivot during this pandemic. But what we were able to do during this time was the development of new tools and engagement of mentors as well as mentees. So we kind of got together very quickly and designed a virtual mentoring guidelines for mentor coordinators. And what that looked like was just some consent forms, virtual mentoring consent forms, to make sure that this, if there was any safety concerns for any programs or program coordinators, parents, or superintendents, that listen, we're putting things in place to make sure that these relationships could continue safely. And that brought an air of a collective sighing of relief that say, listen, we're going to continue to do what we're doing. We have these tools, and we really didn't have much challenge in implementing those, okay? We also made sure that we supported the community-based programs that were supporting schools. And with the virtual mentoring guidelines was able to do were to be implemented, and to also talk about technology, to also talk about how to engage young people virtually, because it's different from face-to-face. And then we also found out there was a new opportunity for corporate engagement. And so with our corporate partners that have mentoring programs, they were able to say, you know something, we can expand, because now we used to drive an hour to the school, interact with our mentees, and then drive back on their lunch break or whatever. Now they don't have to do that. What they can do is, listen, if they are doing Zoom or Google Hangouts or GoToMeeting or whatever other virtual platform, other people became more interested, and we were able to recruit more mentors. So that's a bright spot, because there were some young people that were on a waiting list for mentors, and now we had more mentors to be able to engage. So that was a great right side. So what I want to talk about is the virtual mentoring etiquette tip sheets that we came up with, and basically this was really training, and we devised a training for mentor coordinators as well as mentors. So we did the mentor coordinators one day, and then the next day we did the mentors. And so some of the things that we were able to get across is be aware of your surroundings, right? Select a quiet location for the beginning of the session. Look around to make sure that if e-mentoring is in the video format, your background needs to be appropriate. And Natalie made reference to that earlier. And if it happens to include anything that is not desirable in your background, please remove it. So we had to talk about that with the mentors as well as the mentees. It was great teaching moments. For instance, some mentees were on their bed, and maybe the mentor could say, hey, listen, why don't you go to the kitchen table, or could you go into the living room, and maybe we can have a better conversation that way. So a lot of teaching moments came up, and so that was also a bright spot. We also really talked about mentors need to be really good listeners. Remember, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? And during these difficult times, mentees were isolated socially, physically. Their routine had been disrupted. They were starving for attention, and I witnessed that firsthand. So we wanted to make sure that you mute your microphone and you're not talking when your mentee is on with you. So that was a really good point to go over with the mentors, and also with the mentees as well. Mic check was really important, because I was getting a lot of feedback and emails from mentors saying that, we tried this and the microphone wasn't working. And so there were some things that we were able to send out and make sure that people can get up to date with their technology. So that was also a great engagement tool as well. And really, we asked the mentors not to be distracted. Paying attention to your mentee is key. If you're fiddling with your keyboard or with your phone, it's important that you keep your animals at bay if you can, because at the beginning of the pandemic, it was a critical time to make sure that these relationships continued, and that the mentee felt that they were at the center of that conversation, because it was all about skill acquisition and really about caring about what was really going on. It is still a really scary time. We also asked the mentors, when you talk to your mentees, make sure you ask them to stay seated, stay in one place during the session. And I've seen a couple of sessions where, even in the group mentoring, where mentees were just walking around the house with their phone. And that's fine, in the beginning, but when you really want to concentrate on your relationship, you want to make sure that you pay attention to each other. And it's the same things that we've always taught through the elements of effective practice to our mentors, but we really had another opportunity to circle back and talk about these things, which really made these relationships more enjoyable for everybody, because the seriousness was there and everybody could connect during this time. There was also a time when some technology was not there for some of the mentees. And so they were connecting by telephone. And do you know that some young people really don't use the telephone a lot? So it was an opportunity for us to put into the actual virtual mentoring etiquette, how to use the telephone and have a telephone conversation. So some of the things that we put out there was always identify yourself at the beginning of calls, be sensitive to the tone of your voice, think through exactly what you want to plan to say, discuss it before you place the call. Jot down items you want to discuss with your mentee and maybe questions you want answered, because when you're on the phone call, it's kind of difficult when you're not face-to-face to read each other's cues. If you must interrupt the conversation, say to your mentee, please excuse me for a moment, I'll be right back. And then when you get off, you just say thank you for that. And one of the things that is really important for me was during the telephone mentoring is that you want to make sure that if someone else calls you, that you're respectful of the time you are with your mentee, and you might want to decline that phone call. So those are some things and some real questions that we talked about. And so those are some things we really had to answer. So the virtual mentoring etiquette was great. It was a great way to engage mentors and mentees and mentor coordinators to really focus on the mentoring relationship. So what have we found since the pandemic began? Some mentors did not have the technical capability for Zoom-like sessions with their mentee. So they were getting on Zoom, but did not know how to operate like many of us, right? And when we first got into the Zoom life. So it was great that the mentor coordinators came up to speed really quickly. And in some cases, we found out the mentees were able to teach their mentors how to navigate that because they were already using Google Classrooms and Google Hangout as part of being their school curriculum already. Some programs were opting for hybrid combination, and it's changing here in Connecticut, day by day, right? In the school setting. So one session each month on video, one via email, text, another via telephone or FaceTime, just to mix it up to make sure that the engagement is there. And it's something that some programs have adopted and are continuing to do as we speak. Some mentees who are in school are talking to their mentor from their setting in their usual location. And for school-based mentoring programs, they're really moving slowly to come on board, I think. And there are parts of the schools, at least here in Connecticut, that are no longer used because of COVID. And so it's hard for some programs to continue in their same location. They might be in the lunchroom, or they might be in the counselor's office, but yet and still they're finding a way to make sure that these are still going on. And those are some of the bright spots that we found. We are really engaged, and I really commend all of the program coordinators and the mentors out there for really knowing how to pivot really quickly and to maintain these relationships, and in some programs, build new relationships. So those are the bright spots, and that's what I wanted to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aristide, and to Natalie for sharing from the field. We have a few moments left for question and answer, and Randolph did ask a great question, and I did put an answer to that in the chat. He asked about Zoom gatherings for potential groups, mentors, and mentees, just to get to know each other. And I think any type of connection during this time, would be great. And I did put a couple of things in the chat about that. But are there any questions? If so, if you would love to just put one in the chat box or a couple in there, we will try to answer those. And if you have further questions, we also put our contact on the PowerPoint and inside the chat. So I'll wait to see if there are any questions.
And I will just share while people are thinking about their questions that these slides will be included in the follow-up. So that will be all of the URLs and the great resources will be made available.
Yes. All right, someone asked about the, what said the mentor portal, all the free slots are taken. If you want to actually email me, I can put you in touch with, this was from Cindy. Anyone that's interested, and again, I'm not over the mentor portal, so again, I was just sharing the information, but I can put you in contact with our couple of my colleagues at Mentor to see about what happens with the virtual mentoring portal. So, so it says, someone says, are there issues about students doing this without parent permission? And Randolph, are you talking about meeting virtually on Zoom?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yes.
I'm not sure about that. Aristide and Natalie, are you kind of familiar with about parental permission for Zooms and students?
Yeah, I think that part of the things that we came up with the virtual consent forms, and the parents need to be aware of, just like always, because it's different from face to face. You already have a permission on to meet face to face, but this is virtual. And so there are some differences that you want to make the parent aware of. So if the parent doesn't sign, but I have not found a parent that was not willing to do that. I think it could be problematic to continue that match.
I only brought that up because I'm with the Delaware Foundation for Science and Math Education, and we're the ones who brought Million Women Mentor to Delaware and all that stuff.
Awesome.
But we've always had trouble getting interested mentors to actually meet mentees, and have depended on other groups like Boys and Girls Clubs and whatever to step in and use their vetting processes. Suddenly we're finding the positive of all this virtual stuff is you can do awareness and introductions in a way you couldn't do it, as you said.
Right.
You can even find corporations, which we have, who say, we got more people who are interested in being volunteers because they don't have to go out for so many hours.
Right.
So we had a Million Women Mentors July virtual meeting, which included the national officers, as Amy knows. And it was a great success that we talked about doing this, and we're about to do it. But then all of a sudden somebody said, oh, well, wait a second, can middle school kids invite themselves to deal with, and that's kind of why I'd love to see your slides, and I'm sure we'll get to see that. But on the other hand, they said if it's just a meeting room, and then from there something else happens, that's probably okay.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, I know that we're closing up here really quickly too, but I think that's why most of these programs you still have to do background checks, even if you're meeting in the virtual space. That doesn't, just because you're in the virtual doesn't mean you don't have to do the background checks. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that they always have 2 adults with, even if it's 2 young people. Rarely is it still in that virtual space that it's a one-on-one. Like I said, they do the breakout sessions there as well. And so, yeah, I mean, for the most part, everyone realized they had to make an addendum to protect risk management is very important in this space. I'm also going to put in the chat box with mentorvirginia.org. We have virtual activities. I know some people were interested in some of the things that we're talking about. We have plenty more there too.
Good.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you everyone for being with us today for the Million Women Mentors Summit, and for being with us for this breakout specifically. When I was looking at the numbers, a third of the individuals who were in the previous session on mentoring as a way to grow diversity, equity, and inclusion, both inside and outside the workplace, were actually in this workshop. So that really shows me how important this topic is and how beneficial your time was, presenters. So thank you so very much for being with us today, for sharing your experience and your expertise. And everyone have a great rest of the day. Enjoy the summit, and thank you all again.
Thank you so much, Amy, and everyone.
You.
All right.
Take care.